Thank you very much, Ryan, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Adam Brylowski, and I am the manager of conservation and trail here at the Bruce Trail Conservancy. Today, we'll be looking at our approach to building trail. In order to do that, we'll be looking at the history of the Bruce Trail, including the importance of the Niagara Escarpment, how our organization is structured to route and maintain the Bruce Trail, and then we'll get into some of the standards and guidelines that we use while we do our work. I'd like to start with our mission and vision statements. These are the statements that guide our work. Our mission being preserving a ribbon of wilderness for everyone forever, and our vision being the Bruce Trail secured within a permanently protected natural corridor along the Niagara Escarpment. These statements point to the dual nature of the Bruce Trail, being to both provide a free public hiking trail along the Niagara Escarpment and to protect and create a conservation corridor along this route. The Bruce Trail was initially designed to follow the Niagara Escarpment. The escarpment has a fascinating geological history that goes back over 400 million years. It's the result of millions of years of different conditions in an inland sea that once covered southern Ontario, and it includes the evidence of large sedimentary deposits and lush coral reefs that are now the form of the various layers that we can see that make up the escarpment. It's also home to over 1,500 species of plants, which include 40% of Ontario's rare plant species, 44 species of orchid, 325 bird species, 55 mammals, 34 reptiles and amphibians, 50 fern species, and the oldest trees in Canada east of the Rocky Mountains, these being the stunted eastern white cedar trees that grow extremely slowly on the cliff face of the escarpment, with some having been aged to be over 1,500 years old. In 1990, the Niagara Escarpment was designated as a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve because of all of these unique features. Going back to 1962, a group of people from the Hamilton Naturalists Club, led by a man named Ray Lowes, became concerned with the large-scale aggregate extraction that was happening along the escarpment, and they came up with an idea. If we gave people free public access to this invaluable natural feature, it would help to strengthen a cause to protect it. After 5 years of planning and knocking on doors, the Bruce Trail was completed in 1967. The last remaining pioneer of the Bruce Trail, who's still with us today, is Dr. Philip Gosling, pictured on the left here as he was measuring the trail. He was one of the people that actually went door to door asking private landowners to put the trail on their land. He's still with us today, and he's still an ardent supporter of the Bruce Trail. Today, the Bruce Trail is just shy of 900 kilometers in length, with approximately 500 kilometers of additional side trails. To coordinate this large endeavor, the trail was split into 9 distinct club sections, each of which is responsible for the routing and maintenance of the trail within that section. Since the inception of the Bruce Trail, this work has always been done by volunteers. It's also important to note that the trail crosses over a variety of types of landowner, including private, public, and Bruce Trail-owned land. Each of these can impact how we approach trail building. In the case of private land, we must work with the landowner to ensure that they're comfortable with the trail location, and the same goes with trail on municipal, provincial, or federal land. We also have to be mindful that we can be asked to remove the trail from private land at the request of the landowner at any time. So it's in our best interest to ensure that they are happy with where the trail sits on their land and the uses that happen on it. We calculate right now that the Bruce Trail is just under 72% secure, meaning that 72% of it is on either public land through various agreements or on land that is owned by the Bruce Trail Conservancy. And these types of securement mean that the trail will be there forever. The remaining 28% of the trail exists on private land or along roads. And this is what fuels our land acquisition efforts as we work to protect a permanent corridor for the Bruce Trail. The trail navigates through a diverse array of habitats, including forests, swamp, marsh, meadow, thicket, woodland, farmland, and various escarpment features such as rocky talus slopes, crevices, caves, and cliffs. Each provides for different opportunities and challenges. It also places on us a responsibility to ensure that the trail sits as lightly on the land as possible. In fact, the original Bruce Trail Charter lists one of the main objectives of the Bruce Trail being to engage in and promote conservation of wildlife and natural resources. Our guide for trail workers expands on this by saying, although the trail, with good reason, passes through extensive areas abounding in wildlife, care must be taken not to create any unnecessary disturbance to fauna or flora. Sometimes this may mean routing the trail to avoid sensitive ecological areas, such as wetlands, or to give a wide berth to colonies of rare or endangered plants. So all of our trail routing is done with these principles in mind. In terms of where the trail actually goes, this was explained in the original charter of the Bruce Trail, which stated that one of its main objectives was to establish and maintain for the use of the public a trail to be known as the Bruce Trail, along or adjacent to the Niagara Escarpment and the wildlands associated therewith, from the Niagara Gorge to Tobermory on the Saugeen Bruce Peninsula. Our guideline is the escarpment brow, which is the feature we use when it's available to route the trail. In order to define this route, we developed what we know as the optimum route, which is the ideal route for the trail and the guideline for where we envision the trail would best follow the most escarpment features. You can see the optimum route as the yellow highlighted black dashed line on the picture on the right. This line is what guides us as we acquire land in order to protect the Bruce Trail and the conservation corridor. In all cases, when it comes to placing the trail on the ground, the area must be thoroughly examined, preferably through multiple seasons, before a route is flagged and approvals are sought. Approvals from the landowner are the most important, but the route must also be approved by the local club trail director and ultimately the chair of the Trail Development and Maintenance Committee. And when BTC land is involved, it's also necessary to get the approval of our staff ecologists. An excerpt from our Trail Workers Guide expands on our philosophy for routing the trail by saying, the Bruce Trail winds through some of the most beautiful landscapes in all of Canada, indeed in all the world, as recognized in 1990 when the Niagara Escarpment was designated a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve. This places some special responsibilities on all of us as planners, builders, and managers of the Bruce Trail. In our work, we must always remember that the protection of the flora, fauna, rocks, soil, and waters along the trail is the highest priority. Without the rich and varied natural surroundings of the Niagara Escarpment, there can be no reason to have a Bruce Trail, no reason to hike there. I mentioned our guide for trail workers. The standards for the work that we do are captured in two different publications, both of which are available on the BTC website under Volunteer Resources. These are the Guide for Trail Workers and the Basic Trail Maintenance Guide for Trail Captains and Trail Workers. The Guide for Trail Workers contains all of the necessary techniques and schematics for trail building and is what I will be referring to as we go through most of this presentation. The Basic Trail Maintenance Guide is an abridged version of the larger guide and is meant to be a reference guide for use in the field when trail workers are out inspecting and maintaining their portion of trail. These guides contain a wealth of information, and I would encourage anyone that's interested in trail building to download a copy. In terms of how we structure our trail work, I've already mentioned that the trail itself is split into 9 different club sections. Each of these clubs appoints a trail director to oversee trail maintenance and development activities. The trail director is also responsible for ensuring that there are enough trail captains to adequately cover the entire length of the trail within their club section. And in some clubs, they split up their trail into zones or quadrants and assign leaders to those areas in order to help manage the trail. These trail directors are part of the Trail Development and Maintenance Committee. which also contains our Trail Development and Maintenance Committee chair, who, as I mentioned earlier, is responsible for approving trail routes and changes. The committee also consists of our lead trail auditor, who is responsible for doing a thorough inspection on the trail, which takes approximately 5 years by auditing roughly 2 clubs per year. All of these positions that I've mentioned so far are volunteer positions, but we do have some staff, including myself, helping to provide the program with the resources it needs and also offering our ecological expertise. In total, there are 690 trail sections along the length of the Bruce Trail, each one of which is assigned to a trail captain who inspects it at least twice annually. Any issues that are noted in a trail inspection are captured in a trail status report, which is submitted at the end of the spring and fall. These reports are essential in identifying and prioritizing issues that need to be addressed along the trail. These issues range from things like safety hazards, such as leaning trees, to problems with signage, or structures like bridges and boardwalks that need maintenance or repair. Additionally, in order to capture issues on the trail, we have a feature on our Bruce Trail app that allows users to report a trail issue. This has been proven to be very useful in getting up-to-date info on trail issues that need to be addressed. In fact, last year we received almost 800 of these reports from the app that helped us get a handle on what kind of things need to be done on the trail. While our trail captains tend to be lone wolves or work in pairs and generally take care of things like trimming back vegetation and identifying issues, larger projects are accomplished through work parties. Each club has a different approach to this, with some designating specific days of the week to these projects and others working on the fly, but they are all the driving force that keeps the trail open and usable. Work parties can vary in size, but when it comes to opening a new section of trail, our guide for trail workers suggests a 5-person crew and goes on to say that a crew of 5 people can generally open 1 kilometer of trail in a day. The front person lifts logs out of the way and may use a chainsaw or a large bow saw to remove overhanging limbs, small live trees, and dead trees leaning across or near the trail. A second person rakes a rough path along the best line of travel. Behind them comes a pair of workers with long-handled pruning shears to clip all the small woody plants on the treadway and to trim back small branches overhanging or protruding into the trail. Finally, the rear person uses a fan rake to remove all leaf litter from the trail, thus creating a very obvious path for the hiker to follow. This person should also have clippers to trim off any stubs or plants missed by the people ahead. For trail captains and our work crews, it's always important to have the right tools for the job. These come in 2 categories: hand tools and power tools. Hand tools include loppers or pruning shears to cut back vegetation, and a bow saw or a folding saw to saw through larger branches or thicker woody material. Hand tools also include a mattock pickaxe, which has a wide flat edge that's perfect for digging and cutting trail. You can see that in the bottom left on the slide here. And a McLeod grub hoe, which is next to the mattock and is useful in shaping and tamping down dirt and cutting a back slope along the trail. Power tools include chainsaws to deal with hazardous trees or windfalls, and line trimmers to trim vegetation like grass when the trail goes through open areas. I should also note that chainsaws must only be used by our volunteers who have taken the Bruce Trail Chainsaw Certification course. Now let's get into some of the technical aspects of maintaining the trail. The treadway, or the trail itself, is a single file footpath that should only be 0.6 meters or 2 feet in width. All vegetation above ankle height should ideally be cleared to 1.5 meters in width so that nothing touches the hiker and so that it will not grow in too quickly. It's also important to cut as high as possible to ensure clearance for hikers with tall backpacks. The ultimate goal is to have a continuous arch of vegetation that allows for clearance but also blocks sunlight. And this is helpful to discourage undergrowth from growing back quickly. We cut low-lying vegetation close to the ground surface so that hikers will not get their legs and feet wet from rain-soaked or dew-covered foliage. But we try not to disturb the soil to as much as possible to avoid erosion. We also try to avoid cutting woody vegetation to a point so it doesn't pose more of a hazard if a hiker were to trip and fall on it. Oftentimes we come across fallen trees across the trail, or what we call windfalls. If we do find one of these trees and it's less than 20 centimeters or 8 inches above the treadway, we can generally leave it in place and use it as a step over. This is also helpful because in some cases, it discourages the use of bicycles and other vehicles along the trail. If this log is over 20 centimeters, then it must be removed or cut down to at least 20 centimeters in height. When it comes to trimming branches, we always cut close to the main bough or trunk, but leave a collar so the tree can heal the wound. And we also cut branches at right angles to prevent creating dangerous points. If we were to leave too much material on the cut, then that could encourage rot getting into the tree. And if we were to cut too close to the trunk, then that might present a larger wound for the tree to have to heal. One question we get asked a lot about is poison ivy. Along some parts of the trail, it can be very abundant. And in the southern parts of the trail, there's a variety that can even climb trees. As a general rule, we do not attempt to control it because that would take an immense, continual effort and would put our volunteers at risk. Instead, we install signage when necessary to warn hikers and encourage them to try and avoid it and take the appropriate precautions when you get home. These being to wash your clothing right away and wash any potentially affected skin with dish soap to cut the oils that cause the allergic reaction in some people. I should also mention that poison ivy is a native plant and it produces berries that feed local wildlife. We navigate the Bruce Trail using blazes, which were adopted from our neighbors to the south at the Appalachian Trail. A blaze is meant to be 2 inches in width and 6 inches in height, and is white when indicating the route of the main trail, and blue when indicating the route of a side trail. Most blazes are painted onto trees using latex paint, although when trees aren't available, we use pieces of plywood fixed to a post or a T-bar to paint the blazes on. In some cases, when a white blaze may blend in with the color of surface of what it was painted on, it can be helpful to outline it in black to help it stand out. We call this a tuxedo blaze, and these can be helpful on lighter colored trees such as birch or poplar. When the trail makes a significant change in direction, we use what we call a turn blaze, which involves one blaze above another with the upper blaze offset in the direction of the turn. Lastly, we use an end blaze or a T blaze to signify when a side trail comes to an end. Now let's get a little more in depth about some of the methods we consider as we're routing the trail. One of the largest considerations when doing this is understanding how water will impact the trail as we're routing it. Water was actually the focus of one of our most recent issue of the Bruce Trail magazine, which included a fantastic article written by my colleague Laura Toohey that examines the measures we take to address the impacts of waters on the trail. I'll be examining some of these measures as we continue. The first consideration for addressing a potentially wet trail is to put it in a dry place to begin with, if possible. In many cases, we're restricted on where we can place the trail due to landowner wishes, the amount of available land that we have to work with, or the general topography of the area. But if a higher, dry route is available, it's always best to use that as compared to ravine bottoms or low-lying areas. Fortunately, the Niagara Escarpment is plentiful of ridges, ravine slopes, and hills, which provide the opportunity to keep the trail out of wet areas. The best place for this is mid-slope, where water will run off the trail as it flows downhill. In these cases, it's also important to ensure that the trail is outsloped, which means that it's slightly angled downhill, usually at a grade of approximately 5%. And this will prevent water from pooling on the trail and allow it to continue across the treadway and downhill. The grade or angle of the trail as it crosses a slope is also a huge consideration, both for the hiking experience and also when considering how water will impact the trail. In general, the grade of the trail should not exceed 15%. And if it does, we would start to consider alternatives to a straight trail, such as a switchback, which I'll get into later, or the installation of stairs. For reference, a grade over 20% is considered to be steep. The ideal average grade to aim for is 10%, particularly along long stretches of trail. This doesn't have to be a consistent 10% and can vary for short sections with slightly steeper and slightly softer inclines intermittently, but on average, we should aim for a 10% overall grade. This provides for a better hiking experience, and it also encourages water to continue flowing downhill, because the steeper the trail, the more attractive it is as a route for water to follow, and this can lead to erosion. A good rule to use for determining what an acceptable grade is for a trail on a slope is that it should not exceed half the grade of the hillside or slope that it is on. So if we were to build trail along a slope that's 20%, we wouldn't want the trail we're creating to exceed a grade of 10%. This will help to ensure that water continues downhill instead of along the trail pathway. When routing trail along a slope, another helpful technique to ensure water flows off the treadway is what we call a grade reversal. A grade reversal is a dip in the trail that provides a low spot for water to run downhill and off the trail. They can often be implemented by using the natural topography of the land and can also make a trail more enjoyable. On long downhill sections, they add variety, and on uphill sections, these brief descents help users regain their momentum and catch their breath. For trails on slopes, it's not a bad idea to build in grade reversals every 6 to 15 meters or 20 to 50 feet. This can help to prevent water from gaining momentum and causing erosion. On longer, steep slopes, a number of diagonal paths can be linked together in a zigzag fashion to form what we call switchbacks. Switchbacks wind their way down a hill and allow for greater control of the average grade of the trail, providing a series of moderate climbs rather than a steep, straight run. This is easier for hikers, and it's also less likely to allow for water to channel along the trail. The turning points of switchbacks are also an ideal place to construct a water bar to help direct water off the trail. Water bars are another method of channeling water off the trail corridor. A water bar usually consists of a log, cedar being the best, laid across the trail at an angle of about 45 degrees. The log should be at least 15 centimeters or 6 inches in diameter, stripped of its bark, and must be long enough to fully span the width of the trail. Water bars are dug into a depth of about half their diameter and must be held firmly in place with stakes, preferably located outside the treadway. When installing a water bar, it's important to ensure that the water is not being directed towards any portions of the trail that may occur downhill. It's also important to note that when a water bar is placed at a turn on a switchback, it should be roughly parallel with the direction of the uphill portion of the trail, as the picture in the middle shows. Another method we use when routing the trail across a slope is side logging. Whenever the trail crosses a slope diagonally, it's often a good idea to support the path on the downhill side by a means of series with these side logs, which are kept in place with metal stakes. This delineates the trail, helps to keep the trail surface relatively flat, and prevents the treadway from collapsing or being washed down the hill. Ideally, the packed earth of the treadway should be slightly higher than the side log, with a gentle outslope towards the log. so that water will run off the trail rather than along it. In some cases, to prevent washouts, we may also dig a shallow ditch along the uphill side of the treadway to collect water and keep it off the trail. And in instances where a switchback isn't possible and we need to get hikers up and down a steep incline, we use stairs. Stairs are most suitable for short, steep slopes where there is no opportunity for diagonal movement and where traffic is fairly heavy. We try to limit the amount of steps we install because they can be challenging to build and maintain, but they're a great solution for some of the steep climbs we find along the escarpment. There are a number of different types of designs we can use to construct steps, including using nearby rocks, using old railway ties, or building an entire freestanding structure. Now let's move on from the slopes of the Niagara Escarpment to the flatter areas. Turnpiking is a technique that can be used when the trail follows low-lying wet areas where there is adequate room. It involves lining each side of the treadway with a wooden log at least 10 centimeters in diameter, preferably cedar or hemlock, and then driving an angle iron or wooden stake along the outside to keep these logs in place. Once the logs are in place, trenches can be dug along the outside of the trail, and the material that's been dug can be piled in between the logs. This creates a dry, raised area in the middle, bordered by a drainage ditch on each side that collects water. Ideally, the treadway should be crowned with the highest point in the middle, so that water will drain off to the sides and into the ditches. Turnpiking can be effective, but should also be carefully implemented to ensure that no sensitive vegetation is being impacted when digging the ditches. If we notice water draining across the trail, then it might be helpful to install a culvert. This involves cutting a channel across the trail, installing a drainage pipe, and covering it with rocks and dirt. The size of the channel and pipe depends on the maximum water flow, which should be assessed at peak flow, usually in the late spring. The ends of the pipe should be secured with large rocks, and the upstream sides of the channel should be lined with stones to try and help prevent washouts. Mud mats are a relatively new addition in our battle with water along the trail. They're made from recycled plastic and are typically meant for muddy horse paddocks. Along the trail, some clubs have been finding them to be a useful alternative to building infrastructure like a boardwalk because they're durable, light, and relatively cost-effective when compared to installing a much more permanent structure like a boardwalk. This technique gained traction recently in our Iroquois section on a stretch of trail that we share through an agreement with horses from a local stable. The local stable suggested we try them in some mucky areas on our River and Ruin property in Lowville. Since then, the idea has spread to other clubs, and we're all very curious to see how long they hold up and how they hold up to the steady stream of boots along the trail. In some cases, the water we have to navigate when routing the trail comes in the form of creeks, streams, or rivers. In these cases, bridges are necessary for maintaining trail continuity. Our guide for trail workers provides schematics for the construction of a bridge, but we do see some variation in the design amongst our clubs. Pictured here are a number of different designs, including wooden bridges, metal bridges, and a hybrid of the two. The bridge pictured at the top left was one of three that our trail directors or trail volunteers, led by the trail director, and the Beaver Valley Club installed at Hogs Falls. This was an incredible feat of planning, engineering, and backbreaking work that involved finding a way to get a number of extremely heavy, prefabricated, galvanized steel railings down steep slopes to the riverbank. As a general rule, we use the following guidelines when constructing bridges. A bridge should be between 32 and 48 inches in width. That's 80 to 122 centimeters. If it's less than 1 meter above the bed of a stream, it does not require handrails. If it's between 1 and 2 meters above the bed of a stream, it requires at least one handrail. And if it's over 2 meters above the bed of a stream, it requires handrails on both sides and should be 48 inches wide. Boardwalks are a great solution for when the trail must pass through wet areas. They offer the hiker a chance to keep their feet dry and also protect sensitive wet habitats from being disturbed. The desirable deck width for a boardwalk is 32 to 48 inches or 80 to 122 centimeters, with wider decking being necessary on lengths over 30 feet, so two hikers can pass at once. Boardwalks should be made as level as possible, both from end to end and from side to side. And in some cases, a 2x4 tow rail may be attached to each side of the deck to prevent hikers' boots from slipping off the edge. And if you've hiked the Bruce Trail, there's a good chance that you've had to use a stile before. Stiles are makeshift ladders that are built when the trail needs to cross a fence. They're meant to ensure that fencing remains intact without having to cut it or install a gate. And this can be particularly important when the fence is meant to keep in livestock. They follow an A-frame design with two wooden ladders joined at an angle and a platform on top. As a general rule, it's always best to space the steps on a stile to no more than 30 centimeters apart. And depending on the height of the fence, a stile typically has 4 or 5 steps. And lastly, we have dodgeways. Dodgeways consist of a narrow gap in a fence with two arms projecting at an angle on each side, allowing about 2 feet for passage. This allows for pedestrians to use it, but it prevents bicycles and large livestock from getting through. Stiles can be an effective way of ensuring that the trail is used for hiking only, and we do use them quite often to try and prevent bicycles from using the Bruce Trail. As I've shown through this presentation, there's a lot to consider when planning, routing, and maintaining the Bruce Trail. And it's always good to remember that in the end, all of the work we do is in order to give people a meaningful experience. This work promotes healthy lifestyles and encourages a deeper connection to our natural surroundings, hopefully inspiring some people along the way. And as a parting thought, I'd like to once again point out that all of this work is done by volunteers who spend countless hours out on the trail doing some very time-consuming and difficult work in order to keep the trail safe and usable. Without them, there would be no Bruce Trail. And that concludes our whirlwind tour of how we approach trail building along the Bruce Trail. I hope that you learned something today, or maybe are even inspired to go out and create your own trail. For more information, feel free to check us out on our website or look us up on Facebook or Instagram. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam, for all that information. There's a lot of great details in there and how the Bruce Trail is built and maintained. And on your point about how the trail is maintained by volunteers, I know there are a number of trail maintenance volunteers on this call, so it'd be a great time to say thank you for all the work that you do year round to make sure that the trail is safe for hikers who are passing through it. And so we have a few questions here that have already come in. So if you have questions, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A, or you can raise your hand. But I'll get started on the ones that have come in so far. So two from George Eastwood asking, first, what is a collar on a cut branch? And then he has a question about mud mats and whether there is any risk of them being washed away or stolen, and how they're secured in place.
Right, yeah. So the collar of a branch is it's the lowest part of a branch, usually about an inch or so away from the trunk. And you can generally see that there's a little bit of a difference in bark type, where a branch attaches to the trunk, and leaving this little inch or so of space when you're cutting a branch generally just helps the tree to grow bark over a cut wound. And that's, again, what we call a collar, leaving a collar. If you were to cut the branch to be sort of level with the trunk of the tree, then that would require more energy for the tree to create bark to cover it up. So that's what we mean when when we say the tree collar or the branch collar. In terms of the mud mats, that's an interesting question. Yeah, so they're actually fairly heavy themselves. So and they're sort of textured so that they stick into the mud. And so far, we haven't seen any evidence of them being washed away, but we really wouldn't use them in a situation where there's water that's flowing. We'd put them in an area where there's mud. In terms of them being stolen, that's a good question. So far, we haven't seen that, and we'll keep our eyes open, but fingers crossed they don't get stolen. This is a technique that we just started using, so we're wrapping our head around how it can be applicable, and yeah, we'll keep our eyes open. We'll let you know.
Thank you. Question here from Karen Bergman asking, as the trail is used a lot and the grade erodes, is the trail fixed to improve the grade?
Sometimes. So if there is considerable erosion along the trail, in some cases it's necessary to find an alternate trail route or to bring in material to try and shore up the grade of the trail. Um, yeah, so that does happen from time to time. Uh, there's also, like I mentioned, there's certain techniques that we can use to try and help prevent the erosion of the trail, like side logging and just keeping to the appropriate grade initially. But sometimes we do have to find different alternate routes if there's significant erosion that's happening.
And I have a question here from Peggy Brock asking, how do you discourage hikers from shortcutting switchbacks? And Ruth Moffat asked a similar question, how can hikers, or what can hikers do to ensure braiding and widening of the trail does not occur?
Right. Okay. So that's a good question about switchbacks. It's always a good practice to try and either plan your switchbacks so that they're at the turn. There's some vegetation like trees or large boulders or rocks that would prevent people from taking a shortcut instead of going around the full length of the turn. If that's not available naturally, then you can always try and find material to place there at these corners that would discourage people from taking that kind of shortcut. And in terms of Ruth Moffat's question of, remind me again, Ryan?
Asking how hikers and what can hikers do to prevent widening of the trail?
Yeah. So our advice is always to stay on the treadway, and that includes during mucky conditions. So if you find you're walking through the mud, continue walking straight through the mud and get your boots dirty. Because otherwise, that's going to create these widened trails or what we call braided trails, which are a series of trails that are parallel to each other. So if you see someone that's trying to avoid the mud, just gently suggest that it's better, more sustainable for the trail to actually walk straight through the mud than go around it.
Absolutely. Kind of the importance of wearing proper footwear when hiking, wearing your hiking boots, and not wearing your white tennis shoes that will get extremely muddy.
Or
Um,
flip-flops. That's right.
or
Yeah.
flip-flops. A few points and questions about stairs. I'll go through them all and then you can answer. So you mentioned stairs. There's an ancient and beautiful set of limestone stairs on the Twos Falls side trail in Dundas that is falling apart. Do you know if this will be restored? And
I
then,
don't.
yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't, but I can look into that. And if you shoot an email to info@brucetrail.org, I'll get back to you.
And then Karen Bergman asks, at some point, the crazy steps at Devil's Pulpit in Caledon will have to be replaced. Will that be replaced by a proper staircase?
Again, another good question. Yeah, I'm not too sure. That's something that we'd have to consult with the club about. But again, please shoot me an email and I can look into that and I'll get back to you.
Great. And then another question, or more so a comment on stairs from Karen Bergman asking, can you speak to the incredible staircase at Barrow Bay? They're an amazing feat of engineering.
Yeah, yeah. So the barrel-based staircase was um, really important in trail continuity. That staircase was constructed by the club, the Peninsula Bruce Trail Club, and it was a long, long time coming. And it was the key component in connecting trail that went below the escarpment along the shoreline of Barrow Bay and then up on the top of the escarpment. And in both cases, the Bruce Trail Conservancy had acquired and protected land on either side of the escarpment, but we just needed this one um, staircase in order to get connectivity. And if I remember correctly, the installation of that staircase, it removed a number of kilometers, I think 7 or 8 kilometers of trail that was on roads and allowed it to be routed properly along the ideal optimum route. Um, there were a number of different permits that were required for that staircase, and it was a fairly long process. But uh, in the end, the result was this really, really well constructed, engineered set of stairs that was built by the Bruce Trail Peninsula Club, and we're very grateful for them for doing all that work.
Yeah, it's a lot of great work they did there to make that happen. Um, Question here from Linda Finley asking, what do you recommend for rope handrails?
Right. Yeah. So in some cases, we can use ropes, or not necessarily ropes, but what we recommend is steel wire that is coated by a rubber garden hose. We don't actually recommend using ropes because they can get frayed and break, but using a thick steel wire, fixing it to a tree or a stone, and then again, wrapping it with a plastic garden hose is the best way to provide a handhold on sections that are steep and could benefit from having some sort of railing to hold on to.
Great, thank you. Mary Brown asks, what are the major areas of the 28% unsecured trail? Can you talk about some of the problems and techniques in securing trail in those areas?
Yeah. So the 28% of unsecured trail, I think we've boiled it down to about 600 plus different properties, private properties that we would need to acquire in order to protect the entire conservation corridor and the Bruce Trail. Um, I mean, some of the big challenges are that a lot of these properties have houses on them. So when we're looking at acquiring them, we would be acquiring them with this house or potentially trying to sever off a portion of the property that doesn't contain the house. And those are challenging negotiations when it comes to dealing with landowners. And we've been doing a number of these different acquisition types lately where we buy a property that has a house and then sever off the house portion of the property and try to sell it to recoup some of the money and also to provide people with a place to live. And these can be challenging because I think right now, currently, we're holding on to about 5 houses. And as an organization, that's not necessarily ideal for us because our focus is on the trail and this conservation corridor as opposed to holding on to and maintaining houses. So I would say that that's one of the biggest challenges in this, and shoring up the last 28% is navigating the fact that the trail corridor goes through a lot of parcels that have houses on them.
Great, thank you. Terry Calder asks, does the BTC still allow plastic culverts?
That's a great question. I believe so. Yeah, I think so, Terry. But I will look into that and I'll get back to you.
Raymond Goodman asks, when planting cedar stumps into soil to form a short vertical fence, do I need to treat the part in the ground with some kind of paint, roof, tar, etc., or is cedar okay on the ground in its own?
Yeah, I mean, cedar is fairly rot resistant. I wouldn't recommend painting it with something because they're environmental sensitivities that you have to take into consideration. You wouldn't want to put that kind of material or tar or paint under the ground. There's all kinds of different microbes and mycorrhizae that are teeming with life under there. So I would say that yeah, cedar post in itself is probably rot resistant enough to handle that kind of thing.
Great. Mark Taylor asks, is the club planning to update the guide for trail workers, third edition, add in new best practices, materials, and techniques? And just thank you for the great presentation.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah, that's definitely been something we've talked about. I think the Guide for Trail Workers was last updated in 2001, and the smaller reference guide was just updated at the end of 2024. So yes, there is a plan to update it. That's a much larger undertaking than it was to update the reference guide, but it's on the books, and yeah, stay tuned.
And let's see here. Ruth Moffat asks, I've seen boardwalks on other trail systems that are covered in chicken wire and roof shingles to provide a bit more grip. Some of our boardwalks that are not exposed to sunlight stay quite slippery. Are we considering any grip materials for any of our boardwalks?
I know that in some cases it's best to use rough lumber, so lumber that hasn't been planed, that gives a little bit more grip. Um, in general, I haven't really seen a lot of use of additional materials being added to boardwalks to add more of a grip. Um, but that's a good question, Ruth, and that's something that I can bring up at our next trail development and maintenance committee to see if there's any suggestions from the team about adding more traction on boardwalks, because you're right, they can get quite slippery.
We have a couple people with their hands up, so I'm gonna unmute John McQuaig to start. Go ahead, John.
Hi. I was wondering what the procedures or policies are required for putting trail markers on public roads, like putting them on lampposts, hydroline. Is this something you can just do, or is this something you have to get the municipality approval?
Yeah, generally we reach out to the municipality to let them know that we'll be routing trail along that section and that we'll be blazing it as well.
Thank you.
Another question here from Karen asking, is it possible to consider adding a new side trail at Silver Creek that goes up the escarpment to create another loop from the main trail and maybe joining the Roberts side trail?
It's possible, sure, potentially, yeah. So that would be the prerogative of the club. So what I would do is I would reach out to the local club. I believe it's the Toronto club, and suggest that to them. But again, I can sort of make that suggestion. I'm happy to do that and bring it along to the trail director of the club section.
Then a question here from Paul asking, are there any plans for a trail workers info meeting like in the past?
Yeah, a trail workers info meeting. Sure. Yeah, that's something that we can do. Um, I'll bring it up with the committee and see what we can come up with.
Great. I think that's all the questions. There's a few comments just saying thank you for your great presentation. We appreciate all the work the Bruce Trail does for the trails.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks so much.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks
Ryan.
for coming out today and joining us. I'll send an email out with the recording from today once this has been posted to our YouTube channel, and include some links, including the resources that are available on a website for trail maintenance. All right. Thank you all and have a great afternoon. Bye now.
Bye-bye.